Star Trek Deep Space Nine Field Trip Chapter 1. It's perfectly safe. What could go wrong? Those words would come back to haunt Jake Sisko, but when he heard them spoken, he believed in them implicitly. It was only later that Keiko O'Brien's comment would be proved completely, utterly, and almost fatally wrong. Ms. O'Brien was conducting a lesson in astronomy for her small class of students. The computer projected a huge hologram of the galaxy in the air just above their heads. The 4 quadrants of the galaxy were lightly shaded, and Ms. O'Brien was using a laser pencil to point out the various stars. "This is Sol," she explained, her beam of light picking out a small star near the edge of an arm of the galaxy. "Earth is Sol 3, and this is what humans call 40 Eridani." She indicated a star close to the first. "That's the home star of the planet Vulcan. Both, as you can see, are in the Alpha Quadrant. Now, who can point out where Deep Space Nine is located?" Naturally, Tara's hand was the first up. Jake was a much slower second. Jake's best friend Nog simply rolled his eyes in disgust. Like most Vulcans, Tara was tall, slim, and very serious. She had long dark hair that was usually worn in a ponytail that freed her pointed ears, and cut straight along her forehead, showing her slanted eyebrows. The Vulcan people didn't believe in allowing their emotions to rule their lives, and carefully kept their emotions hidden. Despite her immaturity, Tara was only 7 years old, and as a result, her control over her emotions sometimes slipped. She was always ashamed when this happened, so her friends tried to pretend not to notice. Ms. O'Brien handed Tara the pointer, and she used it to illuminate a star in the Alpha Quadrant. "Quite right," the teacher agreed. "Most of the worlds that we have explored lie within either the Alpha or Beta Quadrant. And, of course, we've started to explore some of the stars in the Gamma Quadrant thanks to the Wormhole." What made Deep Space Nine so important had been the discovery of the Wormhole. This was a strange, almost unimaginable tunnel through space. One end of it rested here, in space close to the planet Bajor. The other end of it was in the Gamma Quadrant, about 70,000 light years away. Going through the Wormhole was a shortcut in space that saved ships years and years of travel. Before the Wormhole had been discovered, nobody had known much at all about the Gamma Quadrant. Now there was a thriving trade, with traffic constantly passing back and forth through the Wormhole. The trouble was, from Jake's point of view, that he had never been allowed to go through it. Jake shifted in his chair. "Only we never get to see those stars, do we?" Ashley nodded. "That's right, Ms. O'Brien. We're sitting right on top of the Wormhole, but we've never been allowed even to peek inside it. It's not fair, is it?" Ashley Fontana was Tara's best friend, a human girl whose mother was one of Chief O'Brien's technicians. Ashley was slightly younger than Jake, with long blonde hair and an ability to repair machines that was almost as good as she thought it was. "Well," her teacher said carefully, "I'm certain it's just that everyone wants to make sure it's safe first." "Oh, sure," agreed Jake. "They've been exploring the Wormhole for well over a year now. When do you think they'll consider it safe?" Tara almost smiled. "Have you ever been through the Wormhole?" she asked Ms. O'Brien. Their teacher was taken by surprise by that question. "Well, no," she admitted. "I haven't." "Would you not like to go?" asked Tara innocently. Jake could barely stop himself from laughing. He could see the edges of the young girl's lips twitching. She was really stirring things up. "Well, yes," Ms. O'Brien replied. "Of course I'd like to go, but it isn't as simple as that, and—" She broke off as she realized that all her students were looking at her with grins on their faces, except for Tara, who somehow managed to keep her amusement down to minor twitches of her lips. "That's quite enough of that," the teacher said firmly. "Let's get back to the lesson, shall we, and not get sidetracked." The lesson continued, and Jake thought he'd heard the end of the subject. To his surprise, he was wrong. That evening, as he and his father sat in their small apartment eating dinner, the computer by the door chimed. Commander Sisko called out, "Come in!" The computer then opened the door. Ms. O'Brien walked in. As she saw the almost empty dessert plates, she said apologetically, "Oh, I'm sorry. I can come back later." "That's all right," Jake's father said. "We've just finished. Jake, perhaps you could run the dishes to the recycler?" Jake got the hint immediately. This was probably going to be adult business, and his father wanted him out of the way. Sure," he agreed. He was used to the procedure. "No," said Ms. O'Brien quickly. "There's no need for Jake to leave. In fact, he's part of the reason I've come here." Commander Sisko shot his son a what-have-you-done-now look. "I see. Has he been up to some mischief with Nog again?" "No, nothing like that," the teacher assured him. "Quite the opposite, in fact. He and his friends made a suggestion in class today that seems to me to have some merit to it." "Really?" asked Jake, amazed at the news. He hadn't expected her to complain about him, but one could never quite tell what went on in teachers' minds. "Really," she agreed, smiling at him. To his father, she explained. "They raised the idea of a field trip." Commander Sisko raised one eyebrow thoughtfully. "A field trip?" he asked. "Yes," Ms. O'Brien replied. "None of them have really been off the station since we all came here, except for a few trips down to Bajor." Jake winced at that, remembering his last trip down to the planet with Nog and the unexpected consequences of their impetuous decision. Ms. O'Brien continued, "They're all getting kind of restless, and I thought a field trip would do them good. Get them off the station and into something a little more stimulating." "I see," Jake's father said carefully. "So you want my permission, is that it? And I assume the loan of a runabout?" "Exactly, Commander," agreed the teacher. His father nodded. "Well, it sounds reasonable enough to me." He gave Jake a quick smile. "Travel broadens the mind, as they say, and these young minds need all the broadening that they can get. So, where do you intend to take them? The Firefalls of Ushara? The monastery fortress of Kaitona? The gardens of pure delight?" Ms. O'Brien shook her head. "None of those," she admitted. "In fact, I wasn't thinking of anywhere on Bajor at all." Commander Sisko shrugged. "Andros, then?" he asked, naming the next closest planet. "Or the asteroid belt?" "Actually, I was thinking of Cetus Beta," Mrs. O'Brien told him. It took a second for the name to sink in, and then Jake's father stared at her in astonishment. "Cetus Beta," he replied. "In the Gamma Quadrant? Surely you must realize that's completely out of the question." Jake had been following the conversation with interest and then excitement when his teacher had suggested a flight to a world in the Gamma Quadrant. His heart sank, though, at the firmness in his father's reply. "Dad," he protested. Commander Sisko frowned. "Don't dad me," he said. To Ms. O'Brien, he added, "Surely you realize how dangerous a trip like that would be, Keiko." To Jake's surprise, Ms. O'Brien didn't back down. "Not at all," she replied calmly. "I've done my homework on this, Commander. Cetus Beta is in one of the closest planetary systems on the far side of the wormhole. There's no intelligent native species in the whole system, and absolutely no animal life of any kind on Cetus Beta itself. The entire world is completely populated by plants. It's just about the safest planet we've ever discovered, and has been checked out by 2 Federation science vessels and declared absolutely harmless." Commander Sisko's frown softened a little. "I see. Anything else?" "Just one more thing," the teacher answered. "My students are all getting restless, being so close to the wormhole. Do you realize that they're all dying to see what it's like? And it's out there, luring them on. You know what children can be like, Commander. How long do you think it'll be before one of them decides to stow away on a ship heading out there?" His father gave Jake a frown. "Knowing these rascals," he admitted, "I'm somewhat amazed that one of them hasn't tried it yet. So you're suggesting that an authorized trip through the wormhole might serve to satisfy their curiosity?" "An authorized, safe, and responsible trip," explained Ms. O'Brien. She seemed to be sensing victory. Just 10 of the students, she added. Jake, Nog, Tara, Ashley, and 6 of the Bajorans. I'd go along, and there would be the pilot of the runabout, too. We could camp out on Cetus Beta for a week, then return. It's perfectly safe. What could go wrong? Chapter 2. Jake was having a great deal of trouble keeping his mouth shut. He was dying to jump in and try and help persuade his father. He knew, though, that he was likely to make his father more obstinate if he interrupted, so he managed somehow to stay quiet. He couldn't prevent the eagerness he felt from showing on his face, though, and his father saw it. With a laugh, Commander Sisko shook his head. "It looks as if I'd better agree," he conceded. "If I don't, I'll have to have every ship leaving the station from now on searched to make certain my son isn't part of the cargo." "Yes!" Jake exploded happily. "Way to go, Dad!" "But," his father said, holding up a hand in warning, "it had better be firmly understood that you and the rest of your friends are to do everything that Ms. O'Brien says, or you'll all be grounded for the rest of your lives. Is that clear?" "Yeah, you bet, absolutely," agreed Jake happily. Turning to Ms. O'Brien, his father added, "All right, Keiko, I think you're correct. These youngsters have been cooped up on DS9 for far too long, and Cetus Beta is probably a lot safer for them than even Bajor would be. You can have a runabout and a pilot for a week's stay. Let me check out the list of supplies you'll be taking and your schedule." He glanced at Jake again and grinned. "I hope you're planning on taking this trip pretty soon. I don't think your students will be able to contain themselves too long." Ms. O'Brien gave a dazzling smile. "I was hoping we could go in a few days." "Fine," Jake's father smiled. "Cetus Beta is a world full of plants, you say? Your own love of botany wouldn't have anything to do with that, would it?" "A good deal," admitted the teacher. She'd been the botanist on the USS Enterprise before she and her husband had been posted to Deep Space Nine. "But I chose it primarily because it's absolutely safe. You know I would never do anything to place my students in danger." "Yes," agreed Commander Sisko. "I know how devoted you are to them, and despite their occasional problems, I think they're almost as devoted to you." He chuckled. "And after they hear about this trip, probably more devoted." Jake could hardly wait till his teacher left. Then he immediately called Nog and told his Ferengi friend the great news. He was bubbling over with excitement at the thought of finally getting to make a trip through the wormhole into a whole alien world in the Gamma Quadrant. "Neat," agreed Nog. "That means we get out of a week of lessons. I like that." Trust Nog to think like that. He wasn't fond of school, but went to be with his friends. Jake called Ashley afterward to tell her. She was a lot more positive, whooping and cheering. She signed off so that she could call Tara and give her the news. It was going to be a terrific trip. That was absolutely certain. The following morning, however, things didn't seem to be quite as bright. When Jake met Nog on his way to class, the Ferengi boy had a deep scowl on his face. "What's wrong?" Jake asked.
My uncle won't let me go on the trip,"
Nog complained.
"He says it's a waste of time."
That was awful. Much as he wanted to go on the field trip, Jake knew it wouldn't be half as much fun if Nog couldn't come along too. "Maybe he'll change his mind," he suggested hopefully.
"Uncle Quark?"
Nog scoffed.
"The only thing he ever changes are banknotes for coins."
He gave a loud sigh.
"I'm just going to have to stay behind while you all have fun. And we'll probably get stuck with a substitute teacher like..."
He shuddered at the thought.
"Darl Tavros."
Jake shook his head desperately. "You've got to come along, Nog. It won't be the same if you don't. There's got to be a way to change your uncle's mind on this." Then he had an idea as he thought about what Nog had said. "I know how. What does your uncle love more than anything?"
"That's easy," said Nog. "Money. He's a good Ferengi."
He sounded proud of his uncle. "Then that's the way to go," Jake said, convinced he'd hit on the right strategy.
Come on.
He led his skeptical friend back to his uncle's game rooms. Quark was there, overseeing getting the place in order for the day's business. Nog's father, Rom, was scuttling about working. Jake knew that it wouldn't make any difference appealing to Rom. He would never dare to disagree with any decisions that Quark made. As in all Ferengi families, the older brother made the rules for everyone. Quark glanced up as Jake approached.
The answer's no, whatever the question is,
He snapped. He was in his usual grouchy mood. But you haven't heard me, protested Jake.
I don't need to hear you, Quark replied. There's nothing you could say that's of any interest to me.
He turned his back on the two friends and concentrated on the pad in his hand. Too bad, said Jake. Sorry, Nog, I guess I'll have to make all the profit on my own on this one. He started to turn away. As he'd expected, he didn't get far. Quark's hand shot out and grabbed his arm.
Profit?
He repeated. He gave his nephew a scowl.
You didn't mention anything about profit. I thought this was just some silly trip for that school of yours.
Jake shrugged. I guess that's all it is then, he said innocently.
You can't fool me, Quark snapped. Isn't this just some silly human thing? Taking a holiday, going on vacation, that kind of thing? And to a world with nothing on it but plants? Not even any nice, profitable ruins filled with antiques?
That's right, agreed Jake. Nothing there but plants. Nothing for you to bother about. Quark glared at him suspiciously.
So why are you so keen on going there? He asked. You're up to something, aren't you? I can smell it. So tell me.
Jake gave an elaborate shrug. I guess I'd better own up, he said. Medicines.
Medicines? Asked Quark. What are you talking about? Are you sick?
No, Jake told him. But you will be if you don't get in on this. What are most medicines developed from? Plants, right? And this is a whole world filled with plants that have never been tested for their medical value. I'll bet there are hundreds of plants on Cetus Beta that might have life-saving drugs in them.
Thousands,
added Nog, catching on to the greedy look in his uncle's eye.
And nobody has a deal as yet for any of them.
Quark tried to cover up the greed in his voice.
As I was saying, Nog, he purred, I think a little trip like this will do you a world of good. Us a world of good. Just be sure you bring back plenty of plant samples, won't you? I'm sure my place could do with some flowers to brighten it up.
Nog chuckled.
And what's my cut?
He asked. Our cut, corrected Jake. It was my idea. Quark considered.
5%,
he finally said. Forget it, said Jake immediately. Ferengi never gave a good offer on the first try. Quark sighed theatrically and squirmed.
Each,
he added.
Done,
said Nog quickly. Grabbing Jake's arm, he led his friend away, grinning.
Not bad for a human. You have to agree to me going, and you may even make us some money off the trip.
I could have gotten 10% each if you hadn't rushed us out, complained Jake.
From Uncle Quark?
Scoffed Nog.
No way. You're not that good.